In exactly 24 hours, a billionaire's life would be over. But right now, at this moment, he doesn't know it yet. He's sitting in London's most expensive restaurant, throwing wine at a waitress, screaming insults, thinking he's untouchable. He thinks money makes him a god. He thinks fear makes him powerful. He has no idea that the woman standing in front of him isn't afraid. And he has no idea that she's been waiting 8 months for this exact moment. The trap has been set, and he's about to walk right into it. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes life has a way of teaching the cruelest people the hardest lessons. And this is one of those stories. A story about power, humiliation, and the moment when someone finally said enough. It happened in London, at a restaurant called the Golden Swan. Not just any restaurant, mind you. This was the kind of place where a single meal could cost more than most people earn in a month. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The carpets were so thick your feet sank into them. And the silence? The silence was expensive. It was a Thursday evening in October. Rain hammered against the tall windows, turning the city outside into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside the kitchen, panic had taken hold like a spreading fire. "He's coming," whispered Jennifer, a waitress who'd worked there for 6 years. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the wine glass she was polishing. "I just saw the Rolls-Royce pull up. It's him. It's Victor Hamilton." Robert, the restaurant manager, went pale. He loosened his tie like he couldn't breathe. "Are you absolutely certain? He didn't book a table." "Victor Hamilton doesn't book tables, Robert," Jennifer shot back, her voice rising with fear. "He just appears and expects the world to bow down. I can't serve him. Last time, he told me my accent was offensive to his ears. He tried to get me fired because the ice cubes in his drink weren't perfectly clear. I have 2 children to feed. I can't lose this job." The fear spread through the kitchen like a disease. Everyone knew about Victor Hamilton, the real estate mogul, the man worth £5 billion. He didn't just own buildings across London, he owned politicians, judges, entire neighborhoods. And he treated people like they were insects beneath his expensive shoes. Victor was famous for his cruelty. He would tip nothing on bills worth thousands of pounds just because a server brought the wrong fork. He'd made grown men cry. He'd gotten people blacklisted from every fine restaurant in the city. He was a monster in a custom suit. Robert looked around desperately at his staff. "Thomas, you handled the Prime Minister last month. Can you?" Thomas, a big man who once worked as a security guard, shook his head violently. "Not a chance. That man is evil. Pure evil. He made me stand by his table for 20 minutes holding his coat because he said the coat rack wasn't good enough. I'm not doing it. I'll take him." The voice cut through the panic like a knife through butter. Everyone turned. Standing by the coffee machine was a young woman named Isabella. She was 27 years old, with dark hair pulled back into a neat bun and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She'd only been working at the Golden Swan for 4 days. 4 days. She wore her uniform perfectly pressed, and unlike everyone else in that kitchen, she didn't look afraid. She looked ready. "Isabella," Robert said slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead, "you don't understand. This isn't just a difficult customer. This is Victor Hamilton. He destroys people for fun. If you make one tiny mistake, he'll have you thrown out on the street. He's vicious. He's cruel. He's a bully," Isabella finished calmly. "Yes, I understand. Table 7 is the best position for him. Corner spot, private but visible. I'll handle it." Jennifer grabbed Isabella's arm. "He'll smell your fear. And if he does, he'll tear you apart piece by piece." Isabella looked at Jennifer with something in her eyes that didn't quite fit. Something hard and knowing. "Then it's lucky I'm not afraid, isn't it?" She picked up a menu, her movements smooth and controlled like a soldier preparing for battle. "Is he alone?" "He always is," Robert sighed, accepting defeat. "Just please don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless he speaks to you first. And whatever you do, don't question anything he says." Isabella didn't promise anything. She just pushed through the kitchen doors and walked onto the restaurant floor like she owned it. Victor Hamilton was already seated at table 7. He'd walked past a hostess stand like it didn't exist. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. His silver hair was swept back perfectly. His face was twisted into a permanent scowl, like the whole world disgusted him. The very air around him felt toxic. Other diners unconsciously leaned away from his table. Isabella approached. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She stopped at exactly the right distance, respectful, but not cowering. "Good evening, Mr. Hamilton," she said. Her voice was steady, professional, without the trembling fear he was used to hearing. Victor didn't look up. He was typing on his phone, his fingers jabbing at the screen with anger. He let the silence stretch. 30 seconds. 45. A full minute. It was a game he played. A test. He wanted to see her squirm, to see her fidget, to watch her break. But Isabella just stood there, perfectly still, waiting. She noticed things about him in that silence. The slight tremor in his left hand, the redness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched so tight the muscle bulged. She noticed everything. Finally, Victor slammed his phone down on the white tablecloth. He looked up at her with eyes like frozen steel. "Why," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "is there no sparkling water on this table already? Do I have to teach you how to do your pathetic job? Or are you simply too stupid to understand basic service?" Most servers would have stammered an apology and run. But Isabella held his gaze. And that's when everything changed. "Let me tell you something about bullies. They expect fear. They feed on it like vampires feed on blood. And when they don't get it, they don't know what to do." Isabella looked at Victor Hamilton, this 5 billion-pound monster, and she didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. Instead, she said something no one had ever dared say to his face. "I haven't poured your water yet, Mr. Hamilton, because the sparkling water we stock is chilled to 5 degrees. Given the humidity in the restaurant tonight and the flushed appearance of your face, I assumed you'd prefer room temperature water to avoid shocking your system. Or perhaps still water would be better, considering the visible swelling in your knuckles suggests high blood pressure, which means you should be watching your sodium intake." The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Victor blinked. For 5 full seconds, this man who'd crushed companies and ruined lives couldn't speak. He looked at his hands. There was swelling. He'd been ignoring it for weeks. What did you just say?" he whispered, his voice dangerous and low. "Would you prefer the chilled, sparkling water? Or shall I bring still water?" Isabella asked, her face completely neutral, like she'd just asked about the weather. Victor's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to logic. He wasn't used to someone actually paying attention to his health instead of just trembling before him. "Bring me still water. Room temperature. And if you take longer than 1 minute, don't bother coming back." "Of course," Isabella said and walked away. In the kitchen, Robert was pacing like a caged animal. "What's happening? Is he shouting? Did he throw something?" "He asked for water," Isabella said calmly, filling a crystal glass. "He's testing boundaries." "There are no boundaries with him," Jennifer cried. "He's a nightmare." "He's just a man," Isabella corrected, placing the glass on a silver tray. "And every man has weaknesses." She walked back out. The real game was just beginning. Victor was on his phone again when she returned. He wasn't whispering. His voice boomed across the restaurant. "Listen to me, Graham. I don't care about the environmental impact report. Those families living in those council flats need to go. Offer them pennies, and if they don't take it, we'll find another way to move them. The development project starts in 2 weeks whether they like it or not. And if you can't handle it, I'll find someone who can." He hung up violently as Isabella set down the water. She poured it smoothly, not spilling a single drop. "Menu," Victor barked. Not please. Not thank you. Just a command, like she was a dog. Isabella handed him the leather-bound menu. He didn't open it. He tossed it aside like garbage. "I don't read menus. I want the 1985 Bordeaux from your wine cellar. The Chateau Margaux." Isabella paused. The Golden Swan had one of the finest wine collections in London. The 1985 Chateau Margaux was legendary. It cost £4,000 a bottle. An excellent choice, Mr. Hamilton, Isabella said carefully. However, our sommelier is currently preparing a 1990 vintage that's been breathing for the past hour. The 1985 we have in stock was moved from the lower cellar just this morning. It hasn't had time to settle. The sediment will ruin the taste if you drink it now. Before the story continues, subscribe. These stories are written to change lives. Victor laughed. It was a horrible sound like rocks grinding together. Are you a sommelier?
No, sir.
I'm your server. Then don't tell me about sediment, he snarled. I want the 1985, and I want it now. Go fetch it, girl. Fetch it, girl. The words hung in the air like poison. It was designed to humiliate her, to strip away her dignity, to remind her that in his eyes, she was nothing. Isabella felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down into that cold, calculating part of her brain. He wants me to react, she thought. He wants me to break, so he can feel powerful. Because right now he's losing control of something, and this is how he copes. Very well, she said. She went to the wine cellar. The sommelier, a French man named Laurent, looked at the order and shook his head sadly. The 1985 for table 7. It is wasted on him. He drinks fine wine like it's soda. I know, Isabella said quietly, but give it to me anyway. She brought the bottle back. She presented the label. Victor waved his hand dismissively. Just open it. Isabella performed the ritual perfectly. The foil cut. The cork pulled with a soft pop. She poured a small amount for him to taste. Victor swirled the dark red liquid. He took a sip, and then his face twisted in exaggerated disgust. He spat the wine into his napkin and threw the napkin onto the floor. Vinegar, he shouted. Every head in the restaurant turned. Robert froze by the entrance, his face going ghostly white. This is absolute garbage. You brought me a bad bottle. Are you trying to poison me, or are you just incompetent? Isabella stood perfectly still. The bottle was in her hands. The wine was flawless. She could smell the complex notes of blackcurrant and oak from where she stood. He was lying. He was performing, creating a scene. The wine is perfect, Mr. Hamilton, Isabella said clearly, her voice calm but loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Are you calling me a liar? Victor stood up. He was tall, imposing, towering over her. I said it's vinegar. Take it away. Bring me another bottle. And I'm not paying for your mistake. This was the trap. If she took it back, she admitted fault. If she argued, she was disrespectful. But Isabella didn't fall for it. She placed the bottle gently on the table. I cannot take back a bottle that isn't flawed simply because you want to feel powerful. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that restaurant. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Victor Hamilton's face turned purple. Actually purple. Like someone had painted it that color. What did you just say to me? Isabella took one step closer. Not backing down. Not retreating. I said the wine isn't flawed, Mr. Hamilton. What's flawed is your ability to taste it properly. You've been smoking Cuban cigars all afternoon. I can smell it on your jacket. The heavy tannins in the wine are reacting with the tobacco residue on your tongue. The wine isn't bitter, sir. You are. Someone at a nearby table gasped. A fork clattered onto a plate. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Victor looked like he'd been slapped across the face. In 20 years of dining at the finest restaurants in Europe, no one, absolutely no one, had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever analyzed his habits, called out his behavior, treated him like he was wrong. You insolent little. Victor grabbed the wine glass. The expensive one filled with £4,000 wine. And he threw it. He aimed for the floor, but the splash was wide. Red wine exploded across the white tablecloth, splattered across Isabella's apron, soaked her shoes. The glass shattered into 100 pieces on the carpet. You're fired, Victor screamed, his voice shaking the chandelier above. He pointed a trembling finger at her face. Manager. Get over here now. I want this girl thrown out on the street this instant. Robert practically ran across the restaurant, nearly tripping over his own feet. Mr. Hamilton, I am so sorry. I apologize deeply. Isabella, step back. Go to the kitchen. Please. Robert turned to Victor, bowing his head like a servant before a king. Sir, please, allow me to compensate you. We'll open any bottle you want. Completely free. Please forgive this girl. She's new. She doesn't understand. She insulted me, Victor roared, loving the fear in Robert's eyes. It fed something dark inside him. She told me I smell like smoke. I want her fired. I want you to tell her she's fired right now in front of me, so I can watch her cry. Robert turned to Isabella. His eyes were full of apology and resignation. He mouthed the word, go. But Isabella didn't move. She looked down at the red wine staining her uniform. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor. Then she looked up at Victor Hamilton. And she smiled. Not a kind smile. A knowing smile. The smile of a hunter who just watched their prey walk into a trap. I'm not going anywhere, Robert, Isabella said quietly. Her voice had changed. It was colder now. Sharper. And Mr. Hamilton, you're not firing me. In fact, I think you're going to want to sit down and finish your meal very, very quietly. And why, Victor sneered, would I do that? Isabella reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a clean napkin to dab at the wine stain. Because if you make another scene, I'm going to have to discuss why you were really on the phone with Graham Mitchell earlier. And more importantly, why you're so terrified about the council estate development project and the offshore accounts you're using to hide the bribery payments. Victor Hamilton froze. The color drained from his face instantly. He went from purple to ash gray in 3 seconds. Who are you? He whispered. Sit down, Isabella commanded. And to the absolute shock of everyone in that restaurant, the other diners, the staff, Robert the manager who looked like he might faint, the tyrant Victor Hamilton slowly sank back into his chair. Isabella picked up the wine bottle. I'll get you a fresh glass. The Margot really is excellent once it breathes. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving behind a billionaire who suddenly looked very, very small. But as she pushed through the kitchen doors, her hands finally started to shake. She'd bought herself time, yes. But she knew the real battle was just beginning. Victor Hamilton was dangerous. Cornered animals always were. And she had just backed him into a corner. In the kitchen, the entire staff stood frozen, staring at her like she'd just walked on water. What did you say to him? Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. I saw him sit down. Victor Hamilton never sits down after he stood up to yell. He looked scared. Isabella set the wine bottle down carefully. Her hands were still trembling slightly. I reminded him that everyone has secrets, even billionaires. What secrets? Jennifer asked, stepping closer. Isabella, who are you? You've been here 4 days. 4 days. And you just. I did what someone should have done years ago, Isabella said simply. I refuse to be afraid. But the truth was more complicated than that. Much more complicated. Because Isabella wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't some brave server who got lucky. She was Special Agent Isabella Torres of the UK's Serious Fraud Office. She'd been investigating Victor Hamilton for 8 months. 8 months of following money trails, tracking offshore accounts, documenting bribes paid to council members and planning officials. They knew Victor was dirty. They just couldn't prove it. They couldn't get close enough. Until someone suggested the impossible. Go undercover. Get hired at his favorite restaurant. Wait for him to slip up. And tonight, he'd done more than slip up. He'd walked right into her trap. But the trap wasn't finished yet. The next phase was the most dangerous. Because Victor Hamilton didn't get to be a billionaire by being stupid. He was cruel, yes. Arrogant, absolutely. But he was also cunning. And right now, in that dining room, he was making phone calls. Calling in favors. Trying to find out who she really was. The clock was ticking. And Isabella knew that before this night was over, one of them was going to fall. She just had to make sure it wasn't her. Let me tell you what happened next. because this is where the story gets interesting. Victor Hamilton sat at that table, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent. He was calling his lawyer, his fixer, anyone who could run a background check on a waitress who knew too much. Meanwhile, Isabella was setting up the final piece of the puzzle. See, Victor had one weakness: his arrogance. He truly believed that money could buy him out of any situation, that his wealth made him invincible. And that weakness? That's what Isabella was counting on. She returned to the table with a fresh glass. Victor was off the phone now, watching her like a hawk watches a mouse. "Sit down," he said. Not asked. Ordered. Isabella didn't sit. "I'm working, Mr. Hamilton." "I said sit," Victor hissed. "You know something about my business dealings. That makes you either a spy or an idiot. Either way, you're going to tell me who you work for." "I work for the Golden Swan," Isabella said calmly. "Don't play games with me." Victor slammed his hand on the table. "The offshore accounts. The council estate project. How do you know about those?" "Who told you?" Isabella glanced around. Other diners were watching nervously. "Perhaps we should discuss this more quietly, Mr. Hamilton. You're drawing attention." "I don't care about attention." But he lowered his voice anyway. "I'm going to find out who you are. And when I do, I will destroy you. I will destroy your family. I will." "You'll do nothing," Isabella interrupted. "Because right now you're more afraid than I am." That hit a nerve. Victor's jaw clenched. "I'm not afraid of you." "No," Isabella agreed. "But you're afraid of whoever you think sent me. You're afraid of the investigation you know is coming. And most of all, you're afraid that your empire of corruption is about to collapse." Victor pulled out his wallet. He took out a stack of 50-pound notes and threw them on the table. "Thousands of pounds. Take it. Take it and tell me who you work for." Isabella looked at the money, then at him. "I don't want your money, Mr. Hamilton." "Everyone wants money," Victor said desperately. "Everyone has a price. Name yours." "Justice," Isabella said quietly. "That's my price." Victor stood up abruptly. "I'm leaving. And tomorrow morning, you'll be out of a job. I'll make sure of it." He grabbed his coat from the chair. That's when Isabella noticed something. His phone was still on the table. In his panic and anger, he'd left it behind. "Mr. Hamilton," Isabella called out. "Your phone." Victor turned back. He reached for it, and that's when Isabella made her move. "Actually," she said, "before you go, I think you're missing something else." "What?" Victor snapped. "Your cigarette case. The platinum one. I saw you put it on the table earlier." Victor patted his pockets. His eyes went wide. "Where is it?" "I haven't seen it," Isabella said innocently. "Perhaps it fell?" They both looked under the table. It wasn't there. Victor's face went red again. "You took it. You stole it." "I did no such thing," Isabella protested. "Manager." Victor screamed. "This woman has stolen my cigarette case. It's platinum, worth 30,000 pounds. Call the police. Now." Robert rushed over, looking like he wanted to die. "Mr. Hamilton, surely there's been a mistake." "Call the police," Victor demanded. "I want her arrested. She's a thief." And that's exactly what Isabella needed him to do. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers walked into the Golden Swan. They looked tired and annoyed at being called to a fancy restaurant. One was a young officer named Davies. The other was Sergeant Patterson, a heavy-set man with skeptical eyes. "What's the problem?" Patterson asked. Victor stepped forward, putting on his respectable citizen act. "Officers, I was dining here when this waitress stole my cigarette case. Platinum, inlaid with diamonds. Worth 30,000 pounds. I watched her take it." Patterson turned to Isabella. "Empty your pockets, miss." "I didn't take anything," Isabella said. "He's lying. Check the table. Check the floor." "Empty your pockets," Patterson repeated more firmly. Isabella sighed. She reached into her apron. She pulled out her order pad, a pen, her server's wine key. Then she reached into her back pocket, and her fingers touched cold metal. Her heart sank. When did he? Slowly, she pulled out the platinum cigarette case. The room gasped. Robert put his head in his hands. Victor smiled like a shark. There. Victor shouted triumphantly. Caught red-handed. I want her arrested. I want to press full charges. Patterson's face hardened. Turn around, miss. Hands behind your back. Officer, listen to me, Isabella said urgently. He planted that on me. Dust it for fingerprints. His prints will be on top of mine, proving he touched it last. We don't have cameras in the dining room, Robert whispered miserably. Only at the entrance. Turn around. Patterson grabbed Isabella's arm and twisted it behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut with a terrible finality. Victor leaned in close as the officer began reading her rights. Close enough that only she could hear him. You should have just served the wine, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. Now you're going to prison. And once you're in the system, my lawyers will make sure you stay there. You tried to play with the big boys, little girl. You lost. Isabella looked at him. She didn't look defeated. She looked furious. But behind the fury was something else. Something Victor didn't recognize. Satisfaction. Officer Patterson, Isabella said clearly. Before you take me to the station, I need you to call your watch commander. Specifically, Inspector Williams at Scotland Yard. Patterson paused. You know Inspector Williams? Tell him, Isabella said, her voice steady, that you have a Code 7 detained at the Golden Swan. And tell him if I'm processed into general holding, he'll be explaining to the Serious Fraud Office why their undercover operation was just compromised. The room went silent. Victor's smile faltered. Patterson stared at Isabella, then at Victor, then back at Isabella. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I'm not a waitress, Isabella said. I'm Special Agent Isabella Torres, Serious Fraud Office. And this man, she nodded toward Victor, just handed you the evidence that's going to put him in prison for the next 20 years. She's insane, Victor laughed nervously. She's making it up. She's just a... Make the call, Isabella interrupted. Check my credentials. Code 7. Inspector Williams will confirm. Patterson hesitated. Something in Isabella's voice made him pause. The code she'd used, Code 7, was real. It was an old designation for undercover officers in high-risk operations. Put her in the car, Patterson told Davies. I need to make a phone call. As Isabella was led out into the rain, the restaurant erupted in whispers. Victor stood there, watching her go, feeling triumph surge through his chest. He'd won. He'd gotten rid of the threat. He sat back down and ordered another bottle of wine. But 30 minutes later, the doors opened again. Patterson walked back in. But he wasn't alone. Behind him were 4 more officers. And behind them, wearing a dark suit and an expression of cold fury, was Inspector Williams himself. They walked straight to Table 7. Victor Hamilton, Williams said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. Stand up, please. Victor's smile vanished. What is this? I'm the victim here. That woman stole from me. That woman, Williams said, is one of our finest investigators. And you just gave her exactly what we needed. He nodded to one of the officers, who held up an evidence bag. Inside was the platinum cigarette case. We've examined this case, Mr. Hamilton. Very interesting item. Platinum exterior, diamond inlay. But there's something else. Hidden under the diamonds is a micro-memory card. Contains encrypted files. Financial records. Offshore accounts. Bribery payments. All of it. Victor's face went white. You see, Williams continued, we've been investigating you for months. We knew you kept your records on a standalone drive to avoid hackers. We just didn't know where. A watch? A phone? No. It was this case. You carry it everywhere. Williams leaned in close. But we couldn't just take it. We needed a warrant. Or we needed you to voluntarily hand it to police as evidence. Which is exactly what you did when you planted it on Agent Torres and demanded she be arrested. Victor's legs gave out. He grabbed the edge of the table. The cigarette case is now police property, Williams said. Our tech team cracked the encryption an hour ago. We have everything. The bribery payments to council members. The money laundering through offshore shell companies. The illegal development deals. All of it. He nodded to the officers. Victor Hamilton, you're under arrest for fraud, bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. The officers moved in. They spun Victor around and pressed him against the table, the same table where he'd thought he would enjoy his expensive wine. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "This is a mistake," Victor stammered. "I have lawyers. I have friends in government. I'll have your job." "Your friends have already been arrested," Williams said coldly. "Graham Mitchell was picked up this morning. He's cooperating, telling us everything." They hauled Victor upright. He looked small now. Broken. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. As they led him toward the door, Isabella walked back into the restaurant. She'd changed out of her waitress uniform. Now she wore a sharp navy suit and carried her official badge. She stood in front of Victor as the officers paused. "You were right about one thing," Isabella said quietly. "I did bring you the wrong water earlier. Where you're going, the water comes from a tap next to a toilet. I hope your refined palate can adjust." They dragged him out into the London rain. The last anyone saw of Victor Hamilton that night was him being shoved into the back of a police car, his expensive suit soaked, his hands cuffed, his empire crumbling. The trial took 6 months. The media called it the trial of the decade. Prosecutors didn't just present evidence, they destroyed a man's entire legacy. The courtroom audio recordings were particularly damning. Isabella had been wearing a wire that night at the restaurant. Every cruel word Victor had said, calling her girl, threatening to bury her, admitting to bribes, all of it was recorded. The jury took 4 hours to deliberate. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in prison. All his assets were seized to pay restitution to the families he'd displaced and the workers he'd exploited. Today, Victor Hamilton is inmate number 7743 at Belmarsh Prison. He wears a gray jumpsuit instead of custom suits. He eats cafeteria food instead of 4,000-pound wine. And every day, when he stands in line for his meals, he has to say please and thank you to the people serving him. Because in prison, manners matter. And bullies don't last long. As for Isabella, she went back to work. There are always more cases, more criminals who think their money makes them untouchable. But before she left London, she did one more thing. She took the reward money from the case, the portion given to civilian informants, and split it among the staff at the Golden Swan. Robert paid off his debts. Jennifer saved her house. The kitchen staff got the raises they deserved. Because Isabella understood something Victor Hamilton never did. Dignity isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you treat people when you think nobody's watching. And in the end, somebody is always watching. So the next time you're tempted to be cruel to a server, to a cleaner, to anyone you think is beneath you, remember this story. Remember Victor Hamilton. Remember that the person bringing your water might be the person who brings your downfall. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who's really serving your dinner. And that's how a waitress brought down a billionaire. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the Story Room for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons.